Hi everyone, and welcome to the next video on the poem A Minor Role. So first of all, A Minor Role, the title. Quite an ambiguous title, or at least an intriguing title, as it gets the reader to question, what is the poet going to be talking about here? What is the minor role that they're referring to? Now, for some readers, perhaps those with an involvement in the theatre, will think automatically or as a minor role in a theatre production to mean, a small part. And the language of the theatre does continue throughout this poem. There is this sort of semantic field of performance, so that is certainly something worth considering. But without reading the poem, on first looking at it, a minor role, the reader could be questioning, what are we talking about? A minor role in what? What small role? Is this a small role in a play? Is this a small role in life? What is the minor role that's being referred to? Now, as I've said with all these videos, this is just my interpretation of the video. There will be others, and it's really important for you to read the poem and to come up with your own interpretations and reading as well. But one thing that certainly is true of this poem is it is a dramatic monologue. That's the form that it takes. So you've got one speaker throughout the poem outpouring their kind of feelings, their emotions, their inner thoughts, and that sort of stream of consciousness. Because it is that stream of consciousness. There isn't a regular structure to the poem. Often the lines and the stanzas are quite fragmented, and there's caesura created through the use of semicolons or full stops or end stops as well, which kind of mirrors the way that we think. We don't think when I'm talking now, I'm not necessarily talking in full sentences. There's a jumble, perhaps. There's me going back and forth through things. It's not ordered, it's not sequenced. So that we can see that in the poem. For me, the poem is told from the perspective of somebody who has a serious illness. There's a hint, or there are hints in the poem that it's a serious illness, not a simple illness, as one says about. It's not a broken bone. It's something more serious than that. And because it hints at kind of going back and forth the hospital and enduring long delays, it suggests that this is something that's kind of ongoing in the speaker's life. So yeah, it's kind of the narration of how the speaker sees their life and sees their life being affected by their illness. Yeah, I've kind of said all that. Just going to see if you can, I know it's not really clear to see anyway, but whether that makes things any clearer. Okay, I'll just go with that. Yeah, so I talked about the connotations of performance that's hinted in the title, A Minor Role, and I said that there is a semantic field of performance, words and imagery throughout this poem, and it's almost like the speaker is seeing their life as a performance, perhaps. That theme of maybe your public self and your private self that we've explored in other poems, the idea of kind of putting on a show for people and performing. And there's some other things that I'll talk about as we go through as well along the lines of that performance idea. Okay, but let's get into the annotation of the poem. I'm best observed on stage. So like lots of the other poems that we've looked at, there's a kind of strong, definite opening statement. I'm best observed on stage, kind of declaration, a declarative sentence of how this speaker perceives themselves, and that semantic field of the stage or performance is continued with the word stage. So we've had minor role, we've had stage, and look out for the other performance imagery and words as we go through. But they expand in terms of what role on stage they're best observed as. So I'm best observed on stage, propping up a spear or making endless exits and entrances with my servant's patter. So the speaker is saying that their role, in this whole performance of life is that small, or to use the title's phrase, minor role. They want to be the servant. They want to be somebody who is just propping up a spear at the side of the stage. They don't want to be centre stage. So we get a sense of the kind of persona of this speaker, of their character, their personality, someone who doesn't want the limelight, doesn't want to be centre of attention, doesn't feel comfortable being centre of attention either, wants very much to be in the sidelines, and there's probably a feeling of them feeling a little bit uncomfortable, given perhaps that this illness is promoting them to centre stage and making them the focus of attention that they don't ordinarily want or have. If we consider this poem as a kind of extended metaphor as well, and the performance on stage being like their life, then obviously we could look at endless exits and entrances. This is what I mentioned earlier. It suggests perhaps, or it mirrors perhaps the idea that the speaker is having to go to and from hospital, exit and entrance, or to and from lots of appointments, or in and out of waiting rooms and that sort of things. And this idea of it being endless, again, suggests that this is a kind of a serious illness, and this illness is perhaps they've been enduring it for a long time. We get some of those hints coming through. As I said, they want to be a minor role, the servant, for example. And I think the choice of servant here and servant's patter and what they say, yes, sir, oh, no, sir, it's very much like the speaker is putting themselves below the medical staff that they're talking to, the doctors or the nurses. It's kind of a hierarchy. And by describing themselves as being like the servant, like a master and servant relationship, they are at the mercy of their masters. In the same way that when you are ill, you are at the mercy of the doctors or the nurses or the medical staff that are looking after you. And I don't know, I quite enjoyed this comparison. If ever you've been to the doctor's or appointment and they're kind of giving you advice or telling you what to do, and it's very much yes, yes, sir, no, sorry. Yes, I will do that. I will cut down the salt in my diet. I will take more exercise, whatever it is. Because they are the experts. They're the ones in control, and you are just going along with them, and you have your role in that kind of performance. And then the further implication, I suppose, if you don't behave in that manner, if you don't agree to what the doctors and nurses and medical staff are saying, if I get these midget moments, literation, drawing our attention, these are small moments, but actually the repercussions, the implications of these moments, these conversations with medical staff are quite huge. If I get these midget moments wrong, the monstrous, so more literation, drawing our attention to the impact, fabric shrinks to unwanted sniggers. So the idea, if you do say the wrong thing to the doctor, that there would be an unwanted snigger, that someone would laugh at you, look down on you, condemn you, criticize you. So the speaker feels it's very important to do what the doctors and nurses and medical staff are saying. And it's really important to get that right. And if they don't, then it can cause these terrible, monstrous, awful things. The verb shrinking is perhaps more synonymous with actually what happens to the speaker, them feeling that lack of power and having to go inside themselves, like they're physically shrinking under the scrutiny of the medical staff, perhaps. Okay, and then as the second stanza goes on, we get even more of an idea about who our speaker is and their persona, their personality. But my heart's in the unobtrusive, the waiting room roles, driving to hospitals, parking at hospitals, holding hands under veteran magazines, making sense of consultants' monologues, asking pointed questions politely, checking dosages, dates, getting on terms with receptionists, sustaining the background music of civility. So, well, first of all, my heart is in the unobtrusive. So my heart, the thing that I like, the thing that I hold dear, the thing that I enjoy, are the things which are unobtrusive. So the things that don't draw attention to yourself. To be obtrusive is to invade and be showy and to be centre of attention. So we know that the speaker wants the opposite of that. My heart is in the unobtrusive. I like it when no one is intruding on my life or taking too much notice of me. That's where my heart is. In not being noticed is where my heart is. That's where I feel most comfortable. That's where I'd rather. And then they list, as if it is roles, as if this is a performance. They list all the things that they perform as this sick person, and what we understand, they list all the things that they have to do, all the things that they go through. and the speaker makes clear to us the stuff that they're okay with. I'm okay with driving to the hospital. I'm okay at parking at the hospital. I'm okay sitting there reading the magazines, holding hands. I go through all of these small performances, hardly being noticed, and I'm okay with that, is sort of what they say. But they still have moments where I suppose they show us the importance of getting this right, similar to the stanza before of getting these midget moments right. All these things are important, and sometimes perhaps that importance is elevated. Like, for example, here it says asking pointed questions. So acknowledging actually that even if this is a small role and it's a minor role, it's important to ask those questions. And even when doing so, though, we get a real sense of the speaker ensuring that they are polite, civilized, nice, kind throughout this whole performance. They are not allowing the illness to turn them into a horrible character as well. So when they speak to professionals, and maybe it's hiding inner feelings, and this is the public self that they're showing, that the performance they're doing, if they ask those questions politely, they make sure that they get on terms with receptionists, they get to know the receptionist, like the receptionist, they understand that they need to play this role and play this performance and please others, and they don't want to bring other people down. So in some ways similar to the poem On Her Blindness, perhaps, where the character was trying to keep up the pretense of being able to see things long after they could, showing the world that they're okay. And that this is important. It's important to sustain, to keep going this this idea of being civilized. It's really, really important. These things matter here. And then in this stanza, we kind of move away from the sort of focus on the hospitals and the appointments and the medical staff, but we also then see what things are like for this patient at home or away from the hospital. And even then, they are having to continue with the performance. So at home in the street, away from the stage, at home in the street, you may see me walking fast in case anyone steps. So the idea, again, that personality of this speaker wanting to be alone, not wanting to be intruded on, keeping themselves to themselves, walking fast in case anyone stops. Getting on, getting better. So we've got moments in this poem where the text is in italics, and it's what they are speaking or thinking even more clearly. And so here we have the kind of pre-prepared speech, the performance that this speaker is going to give when everyone asks, how are you doing? We are hearing, because it's a dramatic monologue, just the voice of one speaker, one side of the conversation. So we can assume here that someone has said, oh, how are you doing? Oh, getting on, getting better, as they kind of race away. And interestingly, they describe that performance, that patter, that little speech they preferred as my formula for well-meant intrusiveness. So obviously the idea of the formula is it can solve a problem. So the speaker has prepared what they'll say so they can solve the problem of people bothering them, being intrusive. And the speaker acknowledges that it's well-meant, that it's not intended to intrude or to be unkind, but we know already that they don't like intrusions, that they are perhaps a private person who wants to keep things to themselves. But then moving through, we've got this at home indented right the way over on the page, a real clear physical space here, open to different interpretations. Is the speaker trying to physically separate themselves from those intrusions? Because the previous few lines talked about them walking quickly away, is it to show the speed at which they have tried to get back to the safety of their home? Or because we do have this indentation later in the poem as well, where it seems to be signifying, it's almost like the start of a new stanza, but there's not a complete break. Again, maybe the speaker can't completely break away from what's expected of them. But it could just be as well a long pause, a caesura, because remember, this is a stream of consciousness, it's a dramatic monologue, and sometimes, as I do in these videos as well from time to time, I have to stop and think and pause and what am I going to say next? So it could just be mirroring that convention of speech. At home, thinking ahead. Bed, a good idea. So here the italics are kind of the inner thoughts, even though the whole poem is an inner thought. Bed solves a lot. Parenthesis, like we had in some other poems, adding that bit of information, giving that extra internal thought. Answer the phone. Be wary what I say to it. We get here in this entire stanza, like we had previously, another list. We had the list previously of what this speaker does when at the hospital, listing all the things that they do. And now, even when they're at home, there's that list of performances that they go through. Answer the phone. Be wary what I say to it, to the phone. Perhaps playing with the idea of this being a performance. And so when you answer the phone on stage, it's not someone else, not a real person you're speaking to at the other end of the line. But obviously in this poem, this isn't a performance, this is someone's life, and there is somebody at the end of the phone. But the speaker still feels like they need to be wary about what they say. They don't want to reveal too much. They want to keep things to themselves, that privacy is important to them. But grateful always. So again, acknowledging that people are trying to be kind, grateful that they've called, but still just not enjoying being that centre of attention. Contrive meals. So to contrive is to kind of make something up, to falsify things. Contrive meals for hunger striker. So, trying to make up meals for the hunger striker. So maybe there's a hint here that the speaker is struggling to eat. They've lost their appetite. They're trying to invent meals that they've had. Maybe when they're on the telephone, they're talking about, yes, I've just had a lovely bacon sandwich, when the reality is they haven't. Or just trying to think about contrived meals, make it meals that they might want to eat. So different ways of interpreting the line, as always. Track down whimsical, soft-centered, happy all the way through novels. So these are the things the speaker is trying to do to kind of keep their spirits up. This is the performance they're going through, the pantomime they're going through. Maybe there's a hint here or a question about whether actually they do get enjoyment from these things, or these are the things that just are expected. Maybe the hyphenation here is them desperately trying to do what is expected and find that happiness. But maybe it's faltered. Find the cat, mysteriously reassuring. The basic things that they do that they seem to find reassuring, that there's some certainty in an uncertain time. They found the cat, that's something that they've achieved. Cancel things, pretend all's well, admit it's not. So we get here the semicolons, fragmenting that stream of consciousness, the list of things that the speaker is going through, thinking, doing, and then the end stop this time, where there's that kind of pause. Actually, everything's not okay. I'm not okay. So we have the end stop that creates the pause, where the speaker, to mirror the speaker's doing that, thinking about that, reflecting on that, but also we as a reader have a moment to reflect on that as well. The speaker is not okay, and they're going through this performance, they're going through this pantomime, going through all these emotions, but actually things aren't okay. We're back then to more performance. Learn to conjugate all the genres of misery. Conjugate here is unusual, but essentially learn to put together, learn to perform, learn to practice all of these different forms of misery. And it could be like an actor, practicing, rehearsing, performing behind the scenes. What does it look like to be pensive, or to be sad, or to be depressed, or to be, all the different nuances of the emotion that are being practiced here in this list. Tears, torpor, boredom, lassitude, yearnings for a simpler illness. But there's a tension here, because although we're using the extended metaphor of performance, again, we know that this isn't a performance. This is probably the speaker's reality. This is the turmoil that they are in, that their emotions fluctuate and they go through varying degrees of sadness or depression or loneliness. You know, it's not just one emotion, doesn't just appear in one sort of way. There's lots of different shades of that emotion. They go through all of those different emotions in this illness, possibly. The enjambed line here, yearnings for a simpler illness like a broken leg. And the end stop, again, giving us time to pause here. And this is, you know, quite bleak, quite sorrowful. We feel quite a lot of sympathy here, because actually what the speaker is wanting is to have something much easier to fix. And so that suggestion that this is a complex illness or a critical illness or a terminal illness even, you know, serious, I'm not sure, long-suffering illness, and actually it'd be so much easier if I just had a broken leg, something I knew could be fixed and in a predetermined length of time. Enduring ceremonial delays. So that's another thought that comes into their mind. They've had to endure. And that word enduring connotes kind of suffering and pain and having to put up with something. So we get the sense, comes through in this stanza as well, of the speaker being helpless and being dependent on the medical service, and you know, not being able to do anything if someone isn't available to help them. So that sort of frustration comes through as well. You know, long delays, ceremonial, the idea that this is kind of really almost unbelievable, the delays that they've gone through. And then we get some of the reasons why those delays have happened, being referred somewhere else, consultant's holiday, you know, and that seems perhaps harsh that somebody's on holiday while this person is suffering. But, you know, it's obviously the reality. But we get that real sense of perhaps sympathy here for the speaker. And our sympathy really, really comes through, and the bleakness, the sorrow really comes through perhaps in this next bit, saying thank you for anything. So this idea that this patient has to be grateful for anything that they're given, and they keep up that genteel, polite persona. You know, even perhaps when they phone up for the appointment and they're told, oh, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, the consultant's on holiday, they can see you in 3 months' time. Thank you. The complete dependency that patient has on the medical service, and they have to be grateful and thankful for anything that they're given by anyone. And that seems perhaps a bit harsh or a bit unfair, or we have a bit of sympathy or a bit of pity for that situation. And then again, so here I'm saying is where we've got the same vision on the page, where this line starts right the way over, really, really indented. So for here, it seems most likely the reason being is just it's that pause. It's a change in direction. It's almost a new stanza, but it's not quite, because it's still part of one maybe idea or thought or moment in the speaker's mind. Not the star part. I'm not the star part. I'm not the star of this show. I am insignificant. I am at the mercy of the medical staff. And who would want it? Maybe there's an irony, because actually they are the star part, maybe in some ways. You know, their illness is the main thing. But who would want that? I jettison the spear. I throw the spear. So it goes back to the earlier on in the poem with those moments of the parts they want to play. It was propping up the spear. Now it's throwing the spear. So you can make of that what you will in terms of interpretation, that we've gone from something being quite passive to being active. Maybe the emotion now is stronger at the end of the poem. I jettison the spear, and I guess it's a warrior image as well, isn't it? So there's a strength to this character, and it's not, and yet we've still got the servant's tray, the terrible drone of the chorus. So these minor roles, again, in this play, in this performance, that is this extended metaphor in this poem. And now we have a line from an ancient play. Yet to my thinking, this act was well advised, it would have been better to die. So carrying on with this idea of performance and just using a line from a performance here, it would have been better to die. But that isn't the sentiment of the poem. It's immediately denied by no, it wouldn't. And the exclamation mark, this exclamatory statement, you know, the speaker is telling us very, very clearly that they don't believe it would be better to die. And even though this poem is about being about their thoughts and feelings and their difficulties perhaps in this illness, they are still clinging on to life, and they think that life is important. It's not a melancholy, depressing, sad ending to the poem. It is a life-affirming ending to the poem, and we get this single line on its own which sums up the clear meaning and message behind the poem. I am here to make you believe in life. And maybe there is a sad tension or irony there that, you know, when we see or hear about sick and dying people, it makes us grateful to be alive and thankful for what we have. And the poet is playing around with that idea, actually, that and that's how we should feel and how we should think, and that's what should happen, is we should believe that life is valuable. I'm here to make you believe in life. So this poem is not about being beaten by an illness. This poem is about the power that this minor role, this person going through this illness can have in life and in society. So that's it, a minor role. Hope you enjoyed. I will end it, thank you.